Find the derivative of y equals the cosine of 4x divided by the square root of 2x plus 1. Then evaluate y prime of 0. So y here is the quotient of two functions. The cosine of 4x divided by the square root of 2x plus 1. And therefore the derivative will make use of the quotient rule. First thing we need to do, though, is rewrite that denominator with a fractional exponent. So we have the cosine of 4x divided by the quantity 2x plus 1. It's to the first power in second root, so to the 1/2 power, so that we can take the derivative of it as part of our quotient rule. The derivative, y prime, which can also be called dy dx, will be the derivative of the numerator. Derivative of cosine is negative sine, leave its inside alone, 4x, but then multiply by the derivative of the inside of the trig function to complete the chain rule, so times 4. Derivative of the numerator times the denominator left alone, so 2x plus 1 to the 1/2, minus the numerator left alone, so cosine of 4x, times the derivative of the denominator, which is a power rule. Bring the power down, 1/2, 2x plus 1, subtract 1 from the power, so minus 2/2, and then multiply by the derivative of the inside, which will be a 2, to complete the chain rule of that derivative. All of this will be over the denominator, 2x plus 1 to the 1/2, quantity squared. The next thing I'm going to do is move that 4 to the front of the first term. I'm going to move this 4 here, flip with the negative. So negative 4 sine 4x, and then times 2x plus 1 to the 1/2 power. And then minus, now for the next term we have a 1/2 and a 2, and everything's multiplied and those will cancel each other out. So I will have just a cosine of 4x times a 2x plus 1 to the 1 minus 2 negative 1/2 power. And then all of this will be divided by 2x plus 1 to the 1/2 times 2. 1/2 times 2 is 2/2. You multiply exponents when you raise and raise again like that. So 2/2 or just 1 power. So y prime, or dy dx, will equal, my first term I'm going to leave the way it is, minus 4 sine 4x, and then 2x plus 1 to the 1/2. And then I have minus, in my second term I'm going to take the 2x plus 1 to the negative 1/2 and put it in the denominator, in which case it'll become a positive 1/2 power. Now that I've moved it to the denominator, now this entire thing is over 2x plus 1 to the 2 over 2, or just to the first power. Now what we need to do, we have a fraction in the numerator, so we need a common denominator between the terms in the numerator so that we can combine them. So I need to multiply this first one by a 2x plus 1 to the 1/2 over 2x plus 1 to the 1/2, a form of 1, so that we can produce the common denominator with this other fraction, minus cosine of 4x all over 2x plus 1 to the 1/2 power, and then this entire thing is over a 2x plus 1. So our y prime, or dy dx, will now equal, so for the numerators we're going to multiply these two. Now in the case of multiplying those two, you actually add those exponents, and 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1. Now I have a negative 4 already, and I'm going to put the 2x plus 1 after the negative 4, and then I'm going to write the sine of 4x after that. That's our first term numerator, and then we have the minus cosine 4x as the second term numerator. But we're combining these over a common denominator, so we can just say minus cosine of 4x, and that entire thing will all be over the common denominator of 2x plus 1 to the 1/2. Now what I'm going to do with the denominator down here, it's 2x plus 1. I'm going to put it over 1 so I can reciprocate it and multiply it, and then it will be 1 over 2x plus 1. And this is going to multiply. Reciprocate and multiply. Now that 2x plus 1 that's in the denominator there is to the first power, but we can call it the 2/2 power, so that when we multiply these two with each other, we can add their exponents. Now multiplying the numerators, we will have all of this times just a 1, so it will all stay the same. And then multiplying the denominators, we will have 2x plus 1 to the 1/2, 2x plus 1 to the 2/2, and it will become 2x plus 1 to the 1 plus 2, or 3/2. So there's our derivative in its simplified form. The next thing to do is evaluate y prime of 0, which means to plug a 0 in for each of the x's. So y prime of 0 will equal to -4 times 2 times 0 plus 1 times the sine of 4 times 0 minus the cosine of 4 times 0. And then all of this divided by 2 times 0 plus 1, and then all of that raised to the 3/2 power. So we have -4 times, now 2 times 0 is a 0, plus 1 will just be a 1. 4 times 0 is 0, so we have the sine of 0, and then we have this minus the cosine of 0. All of this divided by 2 times 0, which is 0, plus 1, which is 1, to the 3/2 power. Now the sine of 0 is 0, so we have -4 times 1 times 0, and the cosine of 0 is a 1. 1 to the 3/2 means the square root of 1, which is a 1, and then you cube that result, so we'll have 1 cubed. And back in the numerator, -4 times 1, and then times 0 will all just be a 0, so we have 0 minus 1 over 1 cubed, which is 1. 0 minus 1 is -1 over 1, so altogether that comes out to -1.